Stop recording. Chris Speaks here tonight with Kevin Brown, who is a former combat arms officer in the military, a renowned, highly educated teacher with history, military history. He's got a doctorate and actually teaches law. So I imagine he spent a lot of years in college to reach that. He is an expert on military history. I guess his primary specialty would be the American Civil War, and we'll talk about a interesting and I guess maybe controversial figure in some ways of the Civil War tonight, General Longstreet. So something I'm interested in learning from him about. How are you, Kevin?
I'm doing quite well, Chris. Thank you very much. Great to see you.
Well, thanks a lot. I've been looking forward to chatting with you for a long time. So, tell me about
ourselves on Facebook and and the like. Just to figure that Chris and I have gone at it many times. Extremely detailed, respectful, but we go at it. On various topics. A lot of respect for Chris.
Thank you. I feel the same way.
So we don't always agree, but that's cool. Politically we are completely different, but you can respect people you disagree with. That's the thing I think is missing today. You can disagree with people, still be respectful. Still,
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. We've lost that as a society, and it's really a shame that we've gotten that point in it.
Well, the thing is, I did extensive in my graduate work. I extensively focused on Longstreet. Keep in mind, I'm from Alabama. Okay, I was born in Delaware, but when I was 2 years old, my daddy was from Alabama, little town outside of Birmingham, Tarrant City, Alabama.
I'm from
Alabama, and I stayed there till I went away to college. And I went to Florida, University of South Florida. And I was raised on the lost cause. Man, everything was all Robert E. Lee, Stonewall Jackson, the South shall rise again, and it was in my blood. And then more and more, I saw that, oh my God, this is a bunch of bull. This is not reality. And what really struck me was when I came across Jameslongstreet. Here was this brilliant general that I never heard of, until I got into more advanced study. And then you see how he was so horribly scapegoated. I would submit that Jameslongstreet was the best fighting general of the war, hands down. I think he was the best corps commander. I think that nobody fought troops better. I mean, I include the mighty Stonewall Jackson with it. If you're going to give me a general to work with, I would take Longstreet over Jackson any day of the week and twice on Sunday. Not to undermine Jackson. Jackson certainly had his brilliant moments. Jackson was very inconsistent, though. You might get good Jackson, but you might get lethargic, barely able to get things done Jackson. It depended. He was eccentric. He was moody. Longstreet was steady as a rock, through the entire war. And when the war ended, he was literally a Confederate icon. He was a hero. And then 10 years after the Battle of Gettysburg, he gets blamed for the loss of the Battle of Gettysburg. How can you end the war, one of the greatest generals of the South, and then 10 years after the war become this horrible general that's betrayed the South? Well, it was politics. It was pure politics, because after the war, Longstreet became a Republican. He was good friends with Grant. They'd gone to West Point together and remained good friends their entire life. And worst of all, he became a race traitor. He supported black civil rights. He supported voting rights for black people. So he was seen as a scalawag, right? A race traitor. So 10 years after the Battle of Gettysburg, Jubal Early, William Pendleton, and some other former Confederates who were not particularly good. Jubal Early was a fairly decent division commander under Stonewall Jackson, but was never near as good as he was not a top flight general. Like a decent division commander. William Pendleton was a joke. He was the chief of artillery for the Army of Northern Virginia, and he basically held the position, but they gave him no power because he was so inept. Okay? And they, in 1872, after Lee died, came up with this new thing, say, hey, we'd have won the Battle of Gettysburg, not for Longstreet. 10 years after the battle, right? Sunday. Keep in mind, when the battle happened, did anybody criticize Longstreet? No. No Northern observer, no Southern observer, no foreign observer. Robert E. Lee, nobody. Longstreet Bishop fought wonderfully. But 10 years later, they recreated with the whole Longstreet was supposed to attack in the early morning. Longstreet had a sunrise order. Longstreet was slow. Longstreet was petulant. And it's all bull. It's all. Corey Farr just wrote a couple of very good manuscripts that goes over the fighting of day 2, day 3 in detail. Very similar to the work I had done to it, except his was really good. I mean, he's actually, walking through each minute of it. And it's a house of cards. But politically, it was very, very rewarding. Look, by then, Robert E. Lee was dead. And they turned Lee from a respected general into a deity. Okay? He was Jesus Christ, as far as they were concerned. And they needed a Judas. So they chose Longstreet. But it's all a house of cards. It doesn't hold up to any scrutiny.
Wow. So let me ask you a question. I've heard about the sunrise attack, and we know they met there and whatever they talked about. Well, no, of course I don't think it was giving him a sunrise order attack. But why do they blame Longstreet for the loss? Because he argued with him, or he didn't believe in the attack, or
what really happened is Longstreet thought the attack was a poor decision, which it was. I mean, I'm sure you've walked the ground at Gettysburg. They got the high ground, and most importantly, they've got excellent interior lines. Look, as a former army, give me interior lines anytime on the fence. Okay, if I can reinforce, right, and it was unbeatable. So Longstreet said, hey, he wanted to fight. Lee was a very aggressive general, too aggressive. He literally bled the Army of Northern Virginia dry with victories that were great. They looked great, but they didn't do anything strategically. I'm winning the battles but losing the war is what Lee was doing. He wanted this one Napoleonic knockout punch, which wasn't going to happen. In the new world of rifled muskets, repeaters like Spencers and Sharps, and it wasn't going to happen. Longstreet was more tactically advanced. He understood how to use he had the best staff operations of any general in the war. He understood the importance of the defensive offensive. You get on defense, let the enemy break against you, and you counterattack. Okay, which was the most effective thing you do. He thought the attack was a mistake. He very famously said, when Lee wanted to attack on day 2, he said, "I'm going to strike him," and Longstreet said, if he's there tomorrow, it's because he wants us to strike him, which is a good reason not to do it. He wanted to pull away to a good piece of high ground. There are plenty of pieces of high ground all over. Dig in and say, attack us, which tactically was the best decision to make. Lee overruled him. So at that point, he said he said, well, how about a flanking movement? How about if I flank them around to the right? Lee overruled that. And Lee ordered Longstreet to attack up the Gettysburg Road. And here's the important thing. The objective was Cemetery Hill, right? Not Little Round Top, right? You got this whole thing, this whole Little Round Top thing, which is smoke and mirrors. Little Round Top was never the objective. Little Round Top had no.
That's when Hood and Johnson's divisions got tangled up, right?
Yeah. Well, what happened is when they do start attacking up the Gettysburg Road, you've got Sickles took his 3 Corps and made a salient. Okay? He moved out of position, so they ran into Sickles' Corps, which forced the battle to the right. Okay, which then Little Round Top came into play, only because the battle happened to shift that direction. Otherwise, Little Round Top is meaningless. So they made the argument, well, if he'd attacked earlier, he would have found Little Round Top undefended. One, that was never going to happen because there were always Union troops all around Little Round Top. It took the Union 10 minutes to reinforce Round Top when it became tactically important. So he's never going to find it empty, and it wasn't the objective. The objective was Cemetery Hill, the Union position on Cemetery Hill. So if Longstreet would have, it's like rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. It wouldn't have had any difference, right? And Longstreet was slow. Well, first they hit with the sunrise order, which was totally wiped. In Longstreet in 1872, that was rejected. Lee's own staff came and said, "There's no sunrise order. What are you talking about? Longstreet's troops weren't even on the field at sunrise. There's no way we could have attacked at sunrise." He got his order to attack at 11 o'clock, right? So then they went to round 2. Well, okay, maybe there was no sunrise order because these were just unrepentant liars. These people that were attacking Longstreet were just had no scruples whatsoever. They would tell any lie, make up any story, And Longstreet's trying to like respond, you know, and defend himself. First he ignored it. Then finally started responding to defend himself. Longstreet was Jubal Early was a lawyer and a pretty good lawyer. He had a sharp pen. He could write. Longstreet is crippled. One arm is totally crippled. He's a soldier. He's not a writer, right? But he tried his best to respond. And they just went after him like vicious dogs, just ripping at him. So now they said, well, he was petulant. He was dragging his feet. He was, and so nobody has been looked at as been Monday morning quarterback so much as Longstreet was on day 2 of Gettysburg. But it's all smoke, you know. It's all fizzle. There ain't no steak, you know. Because when you get into
Longstreet have slows?
They claimed that Longstreet drug his feet and went very slowly. Okay, which is just really not true. I mean, the fact of the matter, he got the order to attack at 11 a.m. Okay, with 2 divisions. He asked to wait a half hour, right? Because Law's brigade wasn't there yet. That's about an eighth of his force. Lee said no problem. They wait till 11:30 to get started. But the fact of the matter is, the idea that he could have moved sooner, he could have done something sooner. No, he couldn't. He didn't have orders. And Lee was with him all this time. Lee is with him. Lee's not objecting. Lee's not saying, hey, hurry up. Why are you so slow? But it came out that he was being petulant and obstinate and just a professional soldier, right? This is the best of the best in the Confederate Army, and he's throwing a temper tantrum? No. I mean, there's no evidence to show that. And he gets into attack position by 4 o'clock. So that was too slow. Well, no, it wasn't. I mean, you actually walked the ground, moving 2 divisions that distance. I mean, they had to countermarch at one time. That wasn't his fault. That was Lee's fault. Lee's own guide said to go a certain route and then go over a concealed route. Lee was not interested in doing the attack quickly. He was interested in doing the attack stealthily. He wanted a concealed route. And he gave Longstreet the guide to Captain Anderson, who was going to guide him. Well, Captain Anderson was going to march them right where they could be seen by the Union Army. So Longstreet had to countermarch, okay? Well, they said, once again, people attack him on that. Say, why did he countermarch? Why did he do an about face? Well, if you look at it, that was what they were taught at West Point. When you have to realign, you countermarch. You know, that was the order in the manual. It was literally out of the manual, you know? There was nothing strange about it, you know? He quickly countermarched, kept the concealed route, and got a position by 4 o'clock, which is perfectly reasonable. And then proceeded to do some of the finest fighting of the entire war. Longstreet came this close to taking the Union position, which that position is almost impossible to take, but he nearly did it. The other thing that kills me about the whole thing is, what's the rest of the Army of Northern Virginia doing while Longstreet's attacking with his 2 divisions and 3 brigades from A.P. Hill's corps, and the rest of the Army of Northern Virginia sitting there watching, right? Ewell and Early are on Culp's Hill doing nothing. They were supposed to demonstrate and draw off men, you know, from the Union Army to hold them in place. They didn't attack till 7 o'clock when the fighting was over. So Longstreet pretty much taking all this on his back and nearly wins. And later he's the guy that ruined the battle, you know. What's amazing is, like I said, you got all this Monday morning quarterbacking, second guessing, which is just, you know, like I said, every move he makes is scrutinized. You know, the worst kind. Nobody ever went over one of Stonewall Jackson's campaigns and said, hey, why did you do this? Why did you do that? Why did you do that? But they do it to James Longstreet. And the thing about it is the whole thing is completely immaterial to the outcome. Okay. It wasn't going to change. I lost my train of thought. I was about to say something. I completely lost my train of thought. What was I about to mention? I was going to even really good historic. Well, what happened? Just to kind of back up a little bit. So these lies were coming from Jubal Early, William Pendleton, back in starting in 1872. They controlled the Southern Historical Society papers, a very powerful group, publishing group that was kind of the reservoir, the respiratory of all lost cause ideas. The Southern Historical Society papers published over 70 years, and everything we know from the lost cause pretty much comes from there. And they were powerful. They had a lot of money, well-funded, and they attacked Longstreet constantly. They cut deals with Jeb Stuart's supporters saying, hey, if you let us attack Longstreet, we won't attack you, because Jeb Stuart had pretty much messed up at Gettysburg. They cut backroom deals. They kept attacking. It was politically motivated. A lot of these people couldn't stand Longstreet because they disagreed with him during the war. He once threatened to have William Pendleton shot. Longstreet did. William Pendleton, right before Appomattox, went to Longstreet and said, you got to get General Lee to surrender. And Longstreet was like, you realize I can have you shot. We're trying to get the commanding general to surrender in the face of the enemy, and he just chewed him out, So Pendleton hated him. Jubal Early was really jealous of how good Longstreet was, how loved he was, what a good general he was. Early wasn't good enough to shine his shoes. So they had a personal vendetta. And what happened is maybe the whole thing would have been forgotten eventually as a politically mandated personal vendetta. But the next generation of historians took the lost cause lies that Jubal Early said and repeated them as fact. So you've got Douglas Southall Freeman, the great historian from the 1930s, who was a lost cause, advocate. He worshipped Robert E. Lee. And he repeated everything that it made it even worse. He said Longstreet was totally at fault. Longstreet was petulant. Longstreet delayed the attack. Longstreet was dim-witted, and he won a Pulitzer Prize for his writings, his biography on Lee, which totally scapegoated Longstreet. So at that point, everybody just accepted, it was Longstreet's fault. He was got it, and they kind of wiped him out of Southern history. Longstreet has two statues in America, right? One is hometown of Gainesville, right? By his gravesite. And the one in Gettysburg that just went up in 1998.
Wow.
He was the last guy to get a statue, and it's not even on a pedestal. I like the statue personally. A lot of people don't like it. They say the horse is too small, but I like it. I think it's kind of a cool statue. But for God's sakes, this guy should be carved into Stone Mountain, Georgia. I mean, what do we do in Stone Mountain, Georgia? By the way, my dad took me to when I was a kid. We used to go to Stone Mountain all the time. Actually, my dad was a good old Southern boy. He loved that stuff. You got Jefferson. You got Jefferson Davis, a Mississippian. Stonewall Jackson and Robbie Lee, both Virginians. What are they doing carved into a Georgia mountain? Why don't we have James Longstreet, who was from Georgia? Why isn't he on that mountain?
That's a good point.
And because, like I said, he was a race trader, so he was kind of erased from history. But the thing is, the lies that were accepted are now, to this day, trying to write them. And like the movie Gettysburg did a good job of kind of rehabilitating Longstreet's reputation. Most historians now recognize that, no, he wasn't, at fault. But still, they criticize his day two performance. Gary Gallagher. I have so much respect. Gary Gallagher is one of my favorite historians. Man's brilliant. Okay. And I was listening to one of his lectures where he's repeating pretty much the lost cause lie. Well, on July 2nd, Longstreet was petulant, right? And his idea was, he said, well, when he hit Sickles' salient, when he hit Sickles, he should have moved around to the right. He said under any other circumstances he would have. He had the discretion to move around to the right. But he didn't do it because he was going to prove that Robert E. Lee was wrong. He was going to follow Robert E. Lee's orders to the letter just to show him that he was right. And I'm like, are you what? That is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. And I love Gary Gallagher, but here's the thing: Gary Gallagher is not a military man. Okay, he's a great academic, he's a great scholar, but he never served in the military. Okay, here's the reason that Longstreet didn't have that option, didn't have the discretion. Okay, ordinarily a subordinate commander would have the discretion. If you're my commander, and you say, Kevin, I want you to attack, from the south. And I get there and I say, well, wait, it'd be better for me to attack from the southeast. I have the discretion to move around. But if you tell me to attack from the south and I say, I want to attack from the southeast, and you go, no, you cannot. You will attack from the south. Then I no longer have that discretion. Longstreet had said to Lee repeatedly, let me go to the right, let me go to the right. Lee said, no, you go up the Gettysburg Road, right, and even placed his brigade. This is how I want you to attack. So when the attack came, Longstreet no longer had that option, right? He didn't have the discretion he would have had otherwise. Had he not mentioned to Lee beforehand, he'd have had the discretion. But once your commander says, no, you cannot do that, you don't have that option. I had that happen to me in the Army, to where I wanted to make an attack, actually a flanking attack, and my commander, the battalion commander, said, no, you cannot do that. You will attack straight forward. And once the battle got on, I really became obvious I needed to flank. I couldn't. My commander said, no, you may not. And had I done it, right? I could have been court-martialed.
Yeah.
So that just kind of shows how even really good historians will buy into the lies. Well, something must have been up. He must have been going slow. He must have been, you know, well, the whole thing. When he dawdled before the attack. He dawdled before the attack. Lee was, like I said, was right with him, and they were waiting for Lee's uh, um, 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 man, his Captain Anderson, who was the person that Lee sent out to reconnoiter the route. They're waiting for him. It's not Longstreet delaying, right? And that's something Corey Farr actually does a really good job of documenting in his most recent book, where he actually all from primary accounts. So it doesn't hold up, you know. But to this day, everybody will say, well, okay, maybe Longstreet wasn't to blame for the loss of the battle, but he could have done better. He wasn't himself. He didn't fight as good as he could have. Trying to get rid of a lie is like trying to unring a bell, you know. You know, once it's rung, you can't unring it.
You have to say it loud enough and often enough, people will begin to believe it. Is he blamed for day 3 as well?
Yeah, but day 2 is the one that people usually focus on. They make some odd claims that he muffed the attack, but Pickett's charge is kind of what more could he have done? They said, well, if he'd attacked a little earlier, if he'd that he was not, you know, as aggressive as he could have been. But really, you can't really, you know, put lipstick on a pig on Pickett's charge. I mean, that was such a bad idea. Now keep in mind, on day 3, Longstreet still, right, wanted to go around to the right. He's wanting to flank. By the way, the one thing that Meade said after the battle was the one thing he feared was them flanking on the right. You know, Longstreet was afraid of the thing that Meade was afraid of the one thing that Longstreet wanted to do. He said we were weak there; they could have gotten us. You know, which kind of shows he was right. They just generally blame him in general because he could have done a better job on day 3. But they really have trouble really articulating what was when he supposedly he delayed the attack. You know, he undermined Lee. He could have coordinated the artillery better, and those haven't quite had the staying power that day 2 has. You know, day 2 is the one that, well, if you'd just done it right on day 2, we wouldn't have needed day 3. You know, and like I said, Longstreet was just a good soldier. You know, he was loyal. He loved Lee. Lee and him were very close. It's amazing how they do this. This is one. I'll tell you how sneaky and nasty they were. Longstreet, by the way, Longstreet was the second in command of the Army of Northern Virginia, not Stonewall Jackson, right? I grew up thinking it was Lee and Jackson, right?
Yeah, I'll tell you. Yeah.
Well, Jackson was the number 3 man. Okay, Lee promoted Longstreet ahead of Jackson purposefully, right? He promoted him without reservation. With Jackson, he had some reservations, you know. So definitely he viewed. Now, by the way, Lee, Longstreet, and Jackson make a hell of a combination. I mean, 3 really great generals when you put them all together, and he did a great job. But Longstreet was the more trusted subordinate. Longstreet always got more men to command. Longstreet was the guy he turned to. He was his old warhorse. Jackson, like I said, was inconsistent. Okay, so what happened is also Lee and Longstreet were close. They liked each other. Stonewall Jackson was hard to get along with. Okay, he was eccentric. He was kind of weird. He didn't have any close friends. So Lee used to go and camp near Longstreet. But he liked to hang out with Longstreet. You know, sit around at night, play cards. You know, maybe drink a little whiskey. You know, not that Lee was a big drinker, but so Jubal Early then claimed, well, the reason Lee was always hanging around Longstreet is because he didn't trust him. He felt that he had to constantly be supervising Longstreet. Are you kidding me? He was hanging out with Longstreet because he liked Longstreet. You know, keep in mind after Gettysburg, Longstreet's transferred out to the Western Theater, where he's instrumental in winning the Battle of Chickamauga. The entire time he's gone, Lee is writing letter after letter saying, "Give me Longstreet back. Give me Longstreet back." If Longstreet had betrayed Lee at Gettysburg, would he be begging to have him back? The correspondence between Lee and Longstreet, he's like saying, "I can't wait to have you back, my dear general. You know, we miss you so much. You know, your strong presence in our army is so needed. Please come back to me as soon as you can." And the guy who's with Lee to the very end, to the last day, is Longstreet, right? Lee never said a word against Longstreet his entire life. When Longstreet was being attacked, he said, if only General Lee was alive, right, he would stop this nonsense, you know. But they waited till Lee was gone and then claimed they were defending Lee. One of the biggest things they criticized Longstreet for is they said, well, he criticized Lee. And by this time, you can't criticize Lee. He was a god. He was Jesus Christ. You couldn't criticize. And some historians say, oh, well, he was critical of Lee. What was that? I've been lecturing all day, so I got a little bit of a dry throat. Had a lot of classes today.
Okay.
And he did. In 1866, William Swinton wrote a book called Battles of the Army of the Potomac. A very well-respected book, one of the first books on the Civil War. It's told from a Union perspective, but it's very fair. People in the South even very much respected it. And in that, he interviews Longstreet. What happened at Gettysburg? And he says that what happened is that Lee was fired up. He was over-aggressive. The first day's victories he said sometimes he would lose his equipoise, he said. And then Lee would just attack and attack and attack. That's his horrible criticism of Lee, that Lee, was too aggressive. But that's what everybody else was saying too. I mean, that was after the Battle of Gettysburg, all the people that watched said, well, basically Lee was too big for his britches. He had won at Chancellorsville. He had won all these victories, but shouldn't have won. And he thought his army was unbeatable, and that he simply was too big for his britches. That he got overconfident, and that's what Longstreet says. How dare you criticize Lee? And they beat him up. Now they also claim, historians this day claim, well, Longstreet just when he defended, he told a bunch of lies. And look, Longstreet is very consistent in what he says, but keep in mind he's not a professional writer. He's doing this stuff from memory, so he makes some mistakes, and he's chewed up for his mistakes. But the mistakes were like this. For instance, at one battle, he says, well, my artillery broke up the Union advance. Turns out it was mostly Stonewall Jackson's artillery that broke up the advance. His artillery helped. That's the big lie of Longstreet. It's like, he makes those little mistakes like that, but they make it like, oh, we see, he was a liar. Like, the guy was doing it from memory, His mistakes are honest, oops, I misremembered it a little bit. Actually, Longstreet's what Longstreet published after the war is very, very consistent. But historians today say, well, Longstreet was his own worst enemy when he made responses. I don't think so. I've read them all. I don't think so. I think it's very consistent. Some minor mistakes, but he was trying to stick to the truth, And the thing about Longstreet is he knew this would happen. When he came out after the war and supported voting rights for black people, his uncle, Augustus Baldwin Longstreet, a very renowned judge and Southern writer, actually, and kind of a regional rock star. And he said to Longstreet, he said, son, if you publish this, it will ruin you. If you come out in favor of black civil rights, they're going to kill you. And Longstreet's like, but I think it's the right thing to do. Longstreet was a good, honest man. And he was willing to take a stand for what he thought was right. He said, hey, if we in the South won, he goes, look, we fought, we lost. Now it's time to make amends, to get together. If we want, instead of fighting against black people having rights, let's give them the rights and try to get them on our side. A very progressive way to look at things.
Yeah.
But you can't undermine racism. I'm seeing, you and I from Alabama, we've seen the racism first up. Some people just, you're a race traitor, how dare you? And then he actually led black troops at the Battle of Liberty Place in Louisiana. He was the head of the militia, and he led a mixed force coalition against the I forget the name of it, one of the red shirts, one of the Ku Klux Klan was the other white supremacist organization. So now you're leading black troops against white men. Oh man, you're just a race traitor, man. He was like, just British, and that's what's all political. It's 100% political, and such a shame, for a fundamentally decent person,
Did Pendleton did they, start this because him becoming a Republican, or they felt like that they had to vindicate Lee in?
Well, this is speculation on my part, because I'm trying to figure out what their motives were. I think it was a mixture of things. I think, one, he was a target of opportunity, right? They viewed themselves as the arbiters. Keep in mind, Jubal Early was an unrepentant rebel, an unreconstructed, Confederate. He was like Cassius in with Julius Caesar, the guy who was like, I'm going to get my revenge. Keep in mind, he's the one, he ran away after the war. He ran away. He ran to Mexico. They lived in Canada before finally crawling back to America. Where was he when the South needed him? Longstreet was there trying to help things, But he came back, and part of it was a money-making scheme. Lee was dead. They were controlling the Southern Historical Society papers, which made them some money. They were dedicated to this concept of the lost cause that they were building. They ran all kinds of Lee memorial funds, so they were raising money constantly that they paid themselves salaries out of. So part of it was money, right? And I think Longstreet was one. They personally had problems with Longstreet from the war effort. Remember, by the way, during the war, Jubal Early had nothing but wonderful things to say about Longstreet, but he was always jealous of him. Pendleton hated him, right? And they really needed a scapegoat. And politically, it was. There was a number of different things that got along with that. One, Longstreet didn't really have a good, solid state identification. One of the things that was big there is that if you attacked a man, you also attacked his state. So if I attacked, Leonidas Polk, I'm attacking Louisiana. If I attack Braxton Bragg, I'm attacking North Carolina. If I attack Robert E. Lee, I'm attacking Virginia. Longstreet was born in South Carolina, although he never lived there. His mother's family was from South Carolina, so she went from Georgia to South Carolina just to have the baby. Then he came back to Georgia. Then he lived in Alabama. Then he got his appointment to West Point from Alabama. Then he was stationed all over the West. Then after the war, he moved to Louisiana. Then eventually back to Georgia. So mostly he was a Georgian, but Georgia didn't embrace him as, a favorite son. So he didn't have a strong state affiliation. That made him vulnerable. The fact that he was so controversial because people saw him as a race traitor, I think they just said, hey, Longstreet's a good person to attack. I think it was opportunity. But I think they were motivated by, one, they didn't like Longstreet. They kind of hated Longstreet, but also because they wanted power and they wanted to push the lost cause agenda. And Longstreet was just so convenient. There was nobody, more convenient. And it's kind of like the old trick that, who was it? George W. Bush's hitman. What was it?
Karl Rove.
Karl Rove, yeah, Karl Rove said you attack your enemy's strengths, right? Right, you attack your enemy's strengths, and that's what they attacked Longstreet's battlefield record, which was stellar. It actually works, attacking your enemy's strengths. And they were so relentless that they pulled it off. But yeah, I think they were motivated by the mixture of things. I think that it paid off money for them. It meant their political. It also made them important. These were men who weren't important during the war. Early was no great general. Nobody was given Early a parade. Like I said, William Pendleton was, Longstreet called him the Virginia crowd of third rates. I was like that. Virginia crowd of third rates. They weren't good enough to shine Longstreet's shoes, but now they were seen as icons of the Confederacy. They were the neo-Confederate leaders. Okay, and they enjoyed that. They became rock stars themselves. They're Jubal Early is probably the most important post-war Confederate in the country. There's an old saying that nobody ever wrote about the Civil War during that time period without fear of Jubal Early. That he would come after him. And they controlled, like I said, the Southern Historical Society papers, which had a very, very powerful, a lot of money. So it basically made their career. They made a career out of, defending Robert E. Lee didn't need their defense. Robert E. Lee was doing just fine, But the thing was, Robert E. Lee was a very admirable person. He wasn't Jesus Christ, but they made him Jesus Christ. So you could, to this day, if you go on, Facebook and you say something critical of Robert E. Lee, half the people are like, how dare you criticize the great Robert E. Lee?
Yeah.
It's like, I respect Robert E. Lee. I think highly of Robert E. Lee, but he's not a god, But
I've got two portraits hanging up, and if I've said something, he made a mistake here, and I just, you Southern hater.
How dare you defy the great Robert E. Lee? Because I admire Lee. I do. I admire Lee. I think he was the wrong general for the time. He was too aggressive. He got too many men killed. I think somebody like Joe Johnson would have had a better chance of winning the war, quite frankly. Now, that's speculative history, which I don't like to do. That what if history? What if Stonewall Jackson had been at Gettysburg? I don't like that kind of history, but I think that he was too aggressive. But that's my take on it. Other people say no, he needed to be aggressive. Certainly he was. Tactically he was an incredibly talented general. And seemed like a really nice guy, But they said that, well, he didn't believe in slavery. Of course he believed in slavery. He was a typical genteel Southerner going, well, slavery is really bad, but particularly bad for white people,
he believed in this. I think at that time there probably wasn't many Southerners who didn't believe in slavery because it was such an ingrained part of life.
Let's go back to Longstreet. Longstreet never owned a slave. He never commented on slavery. Now, his family certainly had some slave owners in it because they were plantation owners. His position on slavery seems to be like, he didn't really care. But he still knew he was fighting for slavery. he still supported the institution of slavery. He wasn't personally invested in it because he was a regular Army guy. I don't think Lee came from Lee was from the richest, most prosperous families in Virginia. He was a Carter and a Custis, and then he married into the Washington family. I'm sorry, right. he was a Carter and a Lee, and then married into the Custis Washington family. He was Virginia royalty, and they owned, when you add all these people together, thousands of slaves. He wasn't against slavery. He said, well, slavery's not a good thing. That's what Thomas Jefferson said. Well, slavery's not a good thing, but hey, what are you going to do? And I own 200 slaves. That's kind of a chicken shit way to be. But that's like, well, I think slavery's a bad thing, but I'm going to keep making money off of it.
Yeah.
But that's, like you said, that's the way most Southerners viewed it. Most Southerners just viewed slavery as being a normal, proper. That was just the way things were. We get into this a lot. You see it sometimes. Well, your average Southern soldier didn't care a thing about slavery. Of course they did. Slavery was normal and natural to them. Your non-slave owning Southerners still supported slavery. Slavery was normal. It was a way of life. And 31% of families in the Confederacy owned slaves. That means 69% didn't. But the ones who didn't own slaves either wanted to own slaves because that was the quickest way to be rich and powerful. I want to be the millionaire with all the slaves. Or they benefited from slavery by renting slaves, working as overseers and stuff like that. Also, you got to realize the caste system it created, that 40% of the population were slaves. And if you had white skin, you were superior to 40% of the population, right? So I could be the lowest piece of white trash in Alabama, but 40% of the population has got to kiss my butt and call me sir. And white Southerners treasured that, That was the thing that I think after Reconstruction, and I bring this up very much with my students when we talk about Reconstruction. The thing about Reconstruction that Southerners would not accept, they could accept losing the war, right? We could accept slavery ending. We could accept rejoining the Union. What they couldn't accept was black people being their equal. It was like, no, I'll accept all the other stuff, but you say I'm no better than. So basically, you're going to lower me to the level of a black man, right? That was what they couldn't have. That's why you had the rise of the Ku Klux Klan, the red shirts, the Knights of the White Camellia, the lynching, Jim Crow, was all to defend the caste system, that white men were superior to blacks. And you kind of go ahead.
Yeah, because I've had this discussion. Do you think had they, I don't say if the South had won, but if maybe blacks had not been given the right to vote at that time, or if whites hadn't been disenfranchised and were still remained to be in power, that racial relations wouldn't be as bad as what they were today, because you had these men who were just slaves just a few years earlier, and then suddenly they're running the entire state governments and their congressmen, and there had to be a lot of animosity and resentment.
Here's the thing, and that, by the way, is the Dunning School, basically, which is kind of a cousin of the Lost Cause. The Dunning School basically says, well, the reason Reconstruction failed is because the mean old Yankees came in and all the black people took power. Black people never had power. No black man was ever governor during this time. There were one or two that were lieutenant governors.
Yeah.
About the whites being disenfranchised, the only people that were disenfranchised was any man who swore to uphold the Constitution, meaning if you had held a military commission or a position in federal government, you temporarily lost your right to vote. Okay. Most of those people lost their right to vote for about 2 years, and then all you had to do was get a pardon and you got back. Everybody got them. Longstreet got one, So it's not that they disenfranchised that many people, just the people. Like, for instance, if I would have fought for the Confederacy, I would have been disenfranchised because I was a U.S. Army officer, right? I swore an oath to the Constitution, and I betrayed that oath when I fought against the U.S. Constitution. So people like Longstreet, Jackson, every U.S. Army officer, people like Jefferson Davis, who were, in the U.S. government, they lost their right to vote temporarily. But they got it back within 2 years. That was the horror of Reconstruction. If they eased it in slower, I don't think it would have made any difference, Chris. I think that it wouldn't have made a difference. They weren't going to accept it, period. The real fault of the failure of Reconstruction, I think, lies with the North. The North lost its will. It should have made the South accept it. It should have made it say, look, you're going to, it's equality. The 14th and 15th Amendments are the law of the land. You're going to follow it, period. And then we would have begrudgingly gone, oh, all right, we will, More men like Longstreet who could have led,
Well, I always thought about Reconstruction is they, slavery was free, and it's like, they just abandoned these people. They came in there and said, "Okay, you're free," and they had no skills, no money, and no and just
No money, I'll go along with you, right? What we should have done is gone with the 40 acres and a mule thing,
yeah,
Field Order 15. They should have done that. They should have done that. No skills, though. You got to be careful there. The slaves were incredibly skilled. Who do you think was doing all the work in the South, right? They were the slaves. The slaves had incredible skills. They were. Atlanta was rebuilt by black labor, after the war. Most of your major cities were rebuilt by black labor.
okay.
They didn't have skills. They didn't have a real history. Actually, the leadership shown by black people after the war, they actually weren't that bad. They were actually pretty good. Not all the governments were perfect. Some were corrupt, but they weren't any more corrupt than the governments had been before them. They did a fairly decent job, not perfect. Most of the horrors of Reconstruction were just the general byproducts of a losing war. You can't fight a losing war and not have collateral damage. I mean, so they said, like, for instance, well, they raised taxes. Yeah, they did, and people didn't have a lot of money. I mean, the South was bankrupt at the end of the war. That's what happens when you start a rebellion and lose. That wasn't the black people's fault. I don't think there was any way to do it except to make it happen. They should have made. I think, and I say this as a Southerner, it would have been best for us if they made radical Reconstruction more radical. Had they stuck to it and said, "By God, you're going to accept this, like it or not," and eventually we would have accepted it, right? And we could have moved forward. Instead, the racists kind of won. The South lost the war, but won the peace. Because when Reconstruction ended, they'd stripped blacks of their voting rights. The 14th and 15th Amendments were a joke. Then we had Jim Crow, lynching, another 100 years. I think that the Civil War ended in 1965, with the passage of the Voting Rights Act, right? That ended the Civil War, because the next 100 years, of all that horror was unnecessary,
Yeah, I think I read something that the last battle of the Civil War was George Wallace's stand in the schoolhouse door or something.
I think that was the Civil War being finished. Had they drug us Alabamians, into it, made us do it, we could have done it 100 years ago. Look, here's the thing about this. I just want to say, I love the South. I love the Southern people. I think they're good people. But there's something in us. We have that they've still got that deep-seated racism, that's kind of there. But most Southerners aren't racist. They're not bad people. My great-grandfather epitomized everything I think is good about the South. This man taught me how to hunt and fish. He was tough as nails. I mean, tough, the kind of guy you wouldn't want to mess with. But he would never start a fight. He'd probably finish it in a heartbeat. But he was soft-spoken. He was gentle. And I remember as a little boy, because this was I'm a little boy in the late 60s, early 70s, and watching this stuff. I remember pulling me aside and saying, "Son," he said, "you can't judge a man by the color of his skin. They ain't gonna tell you nothing." He goes, "You got to look at what's in a man's heart, what's in a man's soul." He said, "Don't listen to these." He was a good man. He just typifies kind of everything good I see about the South. He wasn't racist. Southerners are basically good people. But that stain of slavery is kind of still there. It's really such a shame.
What I see today about the people in these groups that are the lost causes are still, it was fought over terrorists or fought over this right here. And what I've come to notice is these people are actually still deep-seated racist, for the most part. I'm not gonna say all of them are, but the comments that I see, I mean, I'm cringe sometimes when I read these.
I know. It's almost like we're still fighting. But the thing is, it's very similar. Somehow it's this concept that you and I, as white men, if somebody else gains something, we lose something. If women gain equal rights, that you and I've lost something. That's bullshit. If there's more equality, that's good for everybody. But some people view that if gay people get more rights, if women get more rights, if black people get more rights, then I, as a white man, have lost something. And I never understood that. But yeah, some of it. The whole thing with the laws, but denying that, the people saying, well, slavery, this war wasn't about slavery. It's like, yes, it was. Like I said, I had noticed in 4 great grandfathers, that's in great, or maybe great, right, that fought for the Confederacy. Okay, I had a couple that fought for the Union too, because my northern family from Delaware. And I don't think and everybody says, well, my family fought for the Confederacy. They didn't own slaves. I don't know if my own family owned slaves or not. Probably not. They weren't wealthy by any means. You know, we were definitely, you know, kind of poor white trash type people, but they supported slavery. They you know, good people, and I know they were probably good people, but good people can fight for a bad cause. But yeah, I mean, I've seen up close and personal growing up that racism you're talking about, and I keep thinking we're going to grow out of it. We're going to move from it, you know, and then it rears its ugly head again, you know. And it's based like this hate thing that I just, it's like the ugliest part of America, you know. I think we just have to be honest about our past, what happened. I teach my students, and I cover racism and slavery extensively, and I would show them, like, for instance, a film that I show on lynching, on the horrors of lynching, which I really want to see, that lynching museum monument that they put down in Montgomery that recently opened up. I want to get back down there. I've been back in Alabama in like 15 years. I got to get back down there. I miss it. Anyhow, I showed them the thing. I showed them these horrible things. I told them about lynching, over 5,000 documented lynchings. You know,
5,000.
Innocent people killed. Yeah, we killed, like, on average, we murdered 2 black people a week just to show them we were in charge. You know, I mean, yeah, that's America. When I murder 2 people a week to show we're boss. And I showed to my students, and some of the white students will say, "Am I supposed to feel guilty about that?" And I say, "Why would you feel guilty? Did you lynch somebody? Did you, you know?
Right.
Why would you? I'm not responsible for what my ancestors did. Okay, I'm responsible for what I do.
Yeah, I agree with you.
I'm responsible to know about it. I'm responsible to be aware of it. That's part of our history. But I'm not responsible. And why, as a white person, would you identify with the guy doing the lynching? Why aren't you identifying with the white person fighting against the lynching? Because there were always good white people fighting for what was right. I mean, look at civil rights movement, the Freedom Riders. Half of them were white, right?
Yeah.
White people, I mean, white Southerners standing up for what was right. You know, throughout history, there were always good people fighting for what was right. There was my great grandfather. You know, there are all these good people. Why do we associate ourselves with the guys wearing the sheets, you know, and burning the crosses, and not associate ourselves with the people that were fighting against those? There was a really great thing. They actually showed it in the movie Rosewood, but it actually based on a real thing, where the mob was, white mob was lynching black people, and they get to the county line, and the white county sheriff is there with 20 guys with shotguns, and said, "You ain't bringing that trash into our county. Our colored are good people, and you ain't touching them," right? And backs the Klan down, right? I mean, white man meets the Klan with shotguns, saying, "You're not going to touch our black people, right? There are people you're not going to," and the Klan, well, okay, you know, backs down. I'm like, that is beautiful, man. That is what's good about the South, you know. Celebrate that, you know. But yeah, I got to tell my students, it's not about guilt. It's about knowing the facts and how it shaped our society today, you know. But like you said, sometimes I see, like, the comments and the racist stuff, and I say, it hurts me, you know. It hurts.
I made a post the other night. I named the historian because we wanted to be left anonymous. But you know, if people saying it wasn't about slavery and blah blah blah, and I said, and the quote was, it was great. Every Supreme Court decision, law that was passed, political discussion was about slavery until the Civil War, and then it wasn't. I thought that was just great the way he put it, because you know it was nothing. Also, it has nothing to do about slavery. every compromise, everything was about slavery until the Civil War, and then it wasn't.
That's an interesting take. It's an interesting take.
Yeah. And I love how, you know, because I've had this, you know, it's like, you know, where in the Articles of Secession does it mention you know, it was all about tariffs, or it was about this right here, or about a tyrannical federal government. You know,
if you look at the succession documents, okay, and you break it down, there are 11 states that succeeded, okay, and look at this number. It says 6 flat out say we're succeeding over slavery. They say it at the beginning. 2 don't say why they're succeeding, but they issue resolutions at the same time saying we're succeeding over slavery. Okay, so 8 of the 11 say we're succeeding over slavery in the documents that of succession. 3 never say anything, but their governor, their senators, their representatives all say we're succeeding over slavery. So if you're going to say it wasn't about slavery, your argument isn't with me. It's not with you. Your argument's with the Confederates that succeeded because they said it was slavery. They don't mention tariffs. I think tariffs are mentioned one time by Georgia, and they talk about how the tariffs are lower. It's like, that was about tariffs, and they sure didn't mention tariffs. Nothing in the documents. There was a wonderful book called The Neo-Confederate Reader. It was edited by Jim Lowen, who was a good friend of mine that died just 2 years ago. A wonderful historian. He's the guy that wrote Lies My Teacher Told Me. It was a best-selling book. He and I were good friends. I still miss him. But it's nothing but primary documents from the Confederates, right? That show you that it's slavery, baby. You know, that's the word. That's their words, not mine. You know. Well, that's why I love this. The lost causers now do this whole pious cause thing. They're trying to sell this pious cause. I don't know of any legitimate historian that argues that the Union was perfect. That the Union, you know, they say, well, you're saying that the Union was that they were all just people that hated slavery and trying to do it. Nobody says that. I mean, the North kind of got drugged kicking and screaming. They weren't fighting to end slavery initially. It developed during the course of the war. They were fighting to preserve the Union, you know, and eventually ending slavery became part of it. The Republican Party wasn't anti-slavery. It was against the expansion of slavery, but it wasn't trying to end slavery. The abolitionists were a very small group, you know. I don't know anybody saying, well, the Union, you know, was this perfect, you know, the United States was perfect and, you know, wanted to have freedom and equality and they were the good guys. It's not black and white, you know. But I love that with, well, pious cause. There's no equivalent on the Union side or the United States side to the lost cause on the Confederate side. You know, I've never really run across any legitimate historian that says, you know, the U.S. was perfect or they were fighting from day one to end slavery. You know, but yeah, the lost cause is so intertwined with racism and this denial of history. You know, the thing is, when you study history, I love history. You know, and my first two loves always law and history, and practically the same. Law and history are practically the same study.
Yeah.
And the thing about history is, you got to take it as you find it, right? And it's going to piss you off. I can't tell you how often I study history and I just go, damn, God, that sucks. You know, I mean, if you're history that doesn't piss you off, you're not really doing history. Okay, you know, if you're reading history, it's just making you happy. That ain't history. That's fairy tales. Okay, because I can tell you how many times I've read something, I'm like, son of a bitch, that sucks. You know, and oh man, come on. You know, I mean, history will if you're really studying history, it's going to be like, oh man, it's disappointing. That's our story. Okay, and human beings are flawed, complicated creatures. You know, and so if you want to, like what they're doing in Florida now, censoring history so it doesn't hurt anybody's feelings, that's not history. You want to be reading Grimm's fairy tales. You know, read Cinderella and Goldilocks and the Three Bears. You know, if you want to do fairy tales, you know, don't pretend history is fairy tales. You know,
I hate how they do that. You know, they whitewashing. You know, don't tell the true story of what was actually going on because it makes it hurting somebody's feelings. I mean, there's been a lot of ills that's committed in this country, and they should be taught what actually took place.
So we can grow from that. You know, I know that it's like the comedian Chris Rock used to do a funny bit where he talked about. He said, if you love somebody, you love them despite their flaws. He said, you got to love the burnt part of the toast, you know?
Yeah.
If you really love somebody, you're going to know the truth. If what's good about it, America has so much that's good about it, and we got so much that's really bad. Well, know about the bad so we don't do the bad anymore, and we can focus on the good. But if we ignore the bad, we just keep doing it again, you know? We just keep doing it again. The reason I don't think America can get past its racist history is that we've never been honest about our racist history. We still have a huge part of America that denies it ever happened. Slavery wasn't that bad. Slavery was 150 years ago, and we minimize it. If you go to Germany, damn, them Germans, they have taken such ownership of the Holocaust. You can go to a 10-year-old school child and ask them about the Holocaust. They know everything about the Holocaust, you know? And they're like, oh man, it was horrible. You know, we killed 11 million people, 6 million Jewish people, and they know it. And they've moved on. They've done a truth and reconciliation. They've been honest about what happened and moved on from it. America is still kind of mired in racism because we're still kind of half pretending it's not real, it didn't happen. We need to be honest about it and then move on. Move on, you know. I'm ready to move on from the whole racist thing, you know. But we never do, you know.
I wonder why that was never really told. You know, I hear people say it was in terms of Yankee history. the stuff. That's what I mean. That's one why it was never put out there um, and taught because even when I was coming to school and we studied history here in Alabama, we never really studied you know blacks or black. We touched on George Washington Carver or stuff like that, but we never really heard about things that went on.
It was
When we talk,
minimized. Right, exactly,
yeah,
exactly. It was made so we wouldn't feel really bad about it. W.E. It was yeah uh not W. Doyce. Frederick Douglass. After the Civil War, Frederick Douglass, the greatest civil rights leaders of the 1800s, and he was horrified. He said, as they're rewriting the war, as the lost cause was taken, he goes, they're forgetting what the war was really about. The war was caused by slavery. It was, and white people basically we reconciled, and it became just this noble fight, brother against brother. What were we fighting against in there? Johnny Red, what were we fighting about? I don't remember it, but Yank, what were we fighting about? Something about it, but we're friends now. And I just kind of pushed the whole black thing off, and the white people hugged and made up. And then we get another 100 years of Jim Crow and lynching, and it created the world. The Civil War created the world we live in today in a very great degree. Like I said, we finished the Civil War with the Civil Rights Movement, and so now we're kind of in Reconstruction again, in a sense. This is Reconstruction Part 2, and sometimes I think we're again.
Yeah, it's I don't know. Maybe another 200 years it'll change. But I don't know. It seems like it continues to get passed down from generation to generation to generations. So many people. I didn't realize there were so many people out there that still believed in some of these lost cause narratives that have been pushed.
Well, and then I mean, not to get too much into modern politics, but Trump has emboldened so many racist type of people, that sort of thing. He kind of made it fashionable to be racist again.
Yeah, in the debate with Biden, and I was like, "Damn, Trump, shut up." They asked him about the Proud Boys, and when he denounced him, and he said, "I'll tell it." He said, "I will say to this: stand back, but stand by." And I was like,
stand. Your virtue. You're signaling the racist. Why don't you just leave a shout out to the KKK while he was at it? I mean, yeah, it was just so embarrassing. Like I said, that just kills me. Like I said, I was a Republican at one time, and as I got older and more educated, I kept going left. I think if I get another degree, I'm probably going to be a communist. One more degree, and I'm going to be a full-fledged commie. But I respected people. Like we were talking about respect earlier. I might disagree with Republicans, or conservatives, but I respected them. That we were both Americans. Now I'm like, are you guys just crazy? Or just if my own party went that crazy, I don't know what I'd do. Like I'm a liberal, but sometimes liberals piss me off. I mean, we were talking about that before. Sometimes I just want to smack liberals. When they get off in the weeds about some silly crap. That doesn't really matter. Some minor things happen and they lose their mind and they lift up their skirts, having a heart attack because of something that does. Some kid dressed up like Pocahontas for Halloween. Like I give a damn, Yeah, who cares? I mean, there's enough injustice. We don't need to go find injustice, but at least we liberal, we kind of slap those assholes down. We go, shut up, I don't know. I mean, she's like let's say somebody like Mitt Romney, who I think is an honest, decent guy. I don't agree with him politically about anything, but he seems like he's an honest, okay. And he's just like, I quit. I'm out of here. And kind of, I'm too old for this shit. I mean, so when the people with the people you respect are abandoning the ship, I don't respect you guys. I mean, I got a lot of respect for you sticking with your party. Hopefully, the same guys like you are gonna outlast the crazies. At least I think on the left we keep our crazies in a little better line. Although sometimes they can overdo things. Why listen to them? Why listen to so one person gets on Twitter and moans and groans? Who cares? Shut up. I just move on from that. Because I'm in academia, and academia tends to be very politically correct. I've gotten in trouble before. I get called on by the dean about once a semester because I said something that pissed off a student. I'm like, hey.
Yeah, I noticed how that's bad. I was reading a thing a while back, and there was a a teacher up in New York University, and he showed Othello, I think, and it was from the 50s, and one of the actors was in blackface, and from 70 years ago, and one of the Asian students complained, and this guy gets suspended, and I'm like, come on, he's showing one of the all-time classics, and
Yeah, like Laurence Olivier doing Othello. He's in blackface, but that was done in like 1946. Okay, it's like yeah, people are getting this imagined slight thing, but it happens. And by the way, the dean of instruction just usually when I go to see the dean, they're like, "Well, you did it again, Kev." It's like, yeah, I tell you, they're going to get pissed off at my class, And it's like, well, I got to talk to you about it. I said, fine. We talked to me. Bye. I'll see you later. And I'm good. They watched. They got my back. But I this last time it's happened late last year. We were discussing the civil rights movement. We were discussing the assassination of Medgar Evers.
Oh God, yeah.
And how Brian De La Beckworth, one of the scummiest guys in history, how he bragged, right? They said no jury in Mississippi is ever going to convict a white man of killing, and he used the N-word. And I said, I warned the class where I said, I'm going to give you the whole quote. I'm not going to censor it. I warned the class, trigger warning. And I said, because it's such an ugly quote, I wanted to hear the ugliness of it.
Right.
So I used the full quote. No jury in Mississippi is ever going to convict a black man of killing a N-word, but I used the word. And I said, isn't that disgusting? Isn't that horrible? I said, he was right. 2 juries, would not acquit, despite overwhelming evidence. And I talked about how he was finally acquitted 20 years later. And one of the students went running to the dean. Professor Kevin said the N-word. So I got called in. Now this dean, particularly, she was like, she's real touchy feely. I like her a lot, and she's like, well, maybe I know what you were trying to do, but maybe the word is just too toxic to you. I was quoting a racist, okay? Like there was I think a guy up at, I forget what college up in New York that was reading an excerpt from James Baldwin, one of the greatest black writers, and James Baldwin used the N-word, right? So he's reading a quote, and they end up suspending the professor for using the N-word. It's like I would never use that in my own language, but if you're quoting something or looking at something from history that uses it, I'm not going to. I can't see watering down racism so it doesn't hurt your feelings.
Yeah, that's like what I talked to him about how Wallace switched over the years in the '58 campaign, and he says, "Well, boys, I'll never be out." He says, "Yeah," I don't hold back from. I say, I quote the historical quotes. I don't think I'm being racist or saying anything wrong, but that's what he said, and that's what people really need to hear. Like what you said, the context of it, so they know how bad it sounds.
I mean, the idea if I tone racism down so it doesn't offend you, am I not defeating the whole purpose? Like I said, I would never use the N-word in ordinary conversation, but I would use it in a quote. But now I'm being told by the people I work for in academia, you probably shouldn't do that either because just too. See, that's political correctness. Everything's got context. Everything's going to have a context. Okay. How did it happen? And if you just go, well, no, it's just verboten. Like I said, showing Laurence Olivier playing Othello in 1946 in blackface, context. Okay, 1946. We can't erase. I mean, for God's sakes, I'm watching a cowboy movie the other day, and it said warning, may contain offensive cultural stereotypes. So showing a Native American, you're giving me a warning that you're going to show Native Americans. So I watched Dances with Wolves. You got to warn me that the Native Americans are living in teepees. That's not that's how they So if you show me an Indian on horseback, I have to warn you, give you a trigger warning. That's the craziness from the left that I can't stand. So,
yeah, the political correctness thing. I mean, like one of the greatest shows of all time that there's no way it ever make it past one episode a day is All in the Family, and I mean, it would never. I mean, these kids they're offended by Seinfeld because of the racism, and I'm like, where are y'all? Where have you found that at? You're offended at Seinfeld? I mean, quit getting offended at everything. We have the greatest generation.
I tell my students, I said, look, if you're not offended at least once or twice a day, you're not paying attention, right? Because the world is filled with offensive stuff. Get used to it, Because yes, sometimes they can just be little snowflakes that toughen the hell up, guys. It's just like
Yeah, I thought they're our greatest generation. 70 years ago was walking across Normandy, and now we've got, boys that are scared, or, crying because they're called my little, dressed up like My Little Pony, and that just really bothers me because I hate to get this rid of it. It seems like men have lost their uh, testosterone or something over the years. And I don't get it. I mean, and I don't. I'll tell you the story. I don't have a problem with gay people, and I've known plenty. But I was stopping at this bar a while back, and my friend was in there, and there was a little bartender. He had pink hair and all these different colors, and he was kind of prancing around, and he uh, he's talking about being in the army, and I kind of chuckled a little bit, and he kept talking about. I said, "Using the army?" And he said, "Yeah." Um, and I was kind of snickered. And he goes, "What?" I said, "Son," I said, "we wouldn't even let you get on the bus." I said, "You would never."
On the positive side with young people, they're also more tolerant.
Yeah,
They're for the most part less racist. They're more accepting. I see a lot of good stuff too, but I also agree we kind of need to toughen some of them up a little bit. I think the females are getting tougher than the guys. I mean,
oh, absolutely.
I teach a military history course, right, which I love. I teach at the University of Delaware, and I get tons of women in there, and the women, right, are better than the guys at military stuff.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
got women they're just kicking butt. And I'm like, damn. If you would think it would be very testosterone fueled, all the guys would come and take the course. Have my courses at least 55, 60% of the courses are girls, and they know their crap. They're like, you know, which I think is great. But I do like the fact that the new generation is more tolerant. They're rejecting a lot of not and like racism is just not acceptable anymore. I think that sometimes they can be a little too easily offended and stuff like that. But they're young, they'll get over it. I got a lot of hope for the young people today. I tell them, I say, hey man, it's up to you now. I did my part. I'm one of the old farts now. I fought my good fight. Now I'm turning the fight over to you guys. Get out there and do what's right.
Yeah, what I'm sad about our military is I've been reading trade doc and how things they've changed, and I read something the other day how they outlawed the shark attack, or where the first day they get the recruits off, and they got three drill sergeants yelling in somebody's face, and
Yeah.
they're not allowing them to do that anymore, and it has to be a non-stressful basic training. And I'm like, what? It's not going to be non-stressful. We're over there in Taiwan trying to fight off a Chinese invasion or
Yeah.
something like that. That
I
it
think, Chris,
should be.
don't worry too much. Sometimes they're easing off some of the things. When it comes down to getting the things done, the military is going to get things done. They're going to do, like, for instance, they changed the rules, saying, like, a couple of years back, you can't, like, actually strike a recruit, which you shouldn't be able to.
Right.
And they're going to ease off on the yelling. But the idea that our military is going to become real feminized, and, the people who run the military, they know what they're doing. I know the whole thing that when I was going through airborne and ranger school, it was the first class that they let women in airborne. When I went through ranger school, women still couldn't be rangers. Now they're going to be rangers, and everybody was like, "Oh, they're going to let women be airborne." There were some women in my airborne course that had kicked my ass. I mean, they were. I mean, they were like, I'd rather have this girl with me in combat than any 10 guys here. But everybody the sky was falling. See, now back when I was in the military, the women weren't allowed in any of the combat arms. I was infantry armor, and infantry armor, artillery, and air defense artillery. No women. Now women are allowed in all of those. The biggest problem I thought with that is I wouldn't want to command a mixed sex force. I couldn't imagine commanding a company of soldiers, right? I just use that because I was a company commander. That's my highest rank I got before I left the military. I couldn't imagine commanding men and women together because they're always trying to have sex with each other, and I command a company of men. I command a company of women. A mixed group company because everybody's trying to get in each other's pants, and they say, well, you can have a gay soldier. Yeah, but they wouldn't be the majority. People at their hormone, men get crazy. You put a guy in a foxhole with some attractive girl, he's going to lose his mind. I saw that when I saw units in the military where it was all who was screwing who, And in combat, I don't want to have to worry about that shit, I want to be able to do my mission, period. I mean, when I was in tanks, I mean, for God's sake, we peed off the side of the tank, Are you gonna have some woman squat down and pee off the side of a tank?
Yeah.
You're in that kind of close quarters. Like I said, I'll command an all-female group, but that's the way they're doing it now. I mean, the Israelis did. The Israelis have had co-ed military for a long time, and Israelis kick ass, But I wouldn't get too caught up in the sky is falling. The military will get what needs to be done. I'm quite sure. When push comes to shove, the military gets things done, But yeah, I see your point that you be a kinder, gentler military when combat ain't kind or gentle, So your point is well taken. Kind of got off Longstreet, but
I was talking off that.
I'm enjoying the conversation.
Yeah, I too. I don't know where we go from here with our military. How much more? The thing that bothers me is to me, manifest destiny's always been what we're doing now is an extension of it. For we're not going to rest until we control every region, continent, everything in the United States, and we're going to end up falling like Rome did.
Everybody goes down sometime, but we're having a good run so far,
Yeah, I mean, we have.
I worry. You mentioned about Taiwan. See, I wonder about that. Would we be willing to go to an actual war to defend Taiwan?
I mean, yeah, would we willing to go put boots on the ground? I don't know. I mean,
I like to think we'd support our ally, but are we willing to lose? I mean, could we take those kind of losses? I mean, we lost, 500,000 people died in World War II. Could we endure that again? Could we endure?
The American people do not stomach casualties.
Yeah, we can't. I can't see. That was because because the Chinese people probably could, much more regimented,
Oh yeah.
Two is that we won World War II with our industrial might,
Right.
I've got a this is a go like this. This is an M1 carbine from 1943. All right. An M1 carbine from 1943. All original parts. It's beautiful. I fire it regularly. It's a wonderful gun. This was made by Quality Hardware. Before 1941, Quality Hardware made typewriters, and then when World War I started, they started making M1 carbines. They made 200,000 of these. They made typewriters, and they turned into making guns. Our car manufacturers started making tanks. We don't have that kind of industrial might anymore.
No. The heartland's been food wiped out. I mean, since when NAFTA got enacted, we've lost 60,000 factories. I mean, we couldn't mass produce everything like we could. It's just gone.
And that's what won the war for us. That's how we won the war. Is our industrial might that we just don't have anymore. So that worries me. I mean, we got the weapons, but we don't have that industrial might, or I think the intestinal fortitude. That's what worried me about a war, because we outsourced all of our stuff overseas. I think the poison that's killing America is greed. I really think the poison that's killing America is greed. It's the very top. The rich getting richer. The middle class is shrinking. It really bothers me,
the middle class is almost gone. I mean, I think they're almost gone. It's almost a poor and wealthy thing now.
My dad was a mechanic, right? He quit high school to join the Air Force, got his GED, came back and was a mechanic. Then he actually went back in the full-time Air National Guard later in life. But he ran a small business. He owned Brown's Appliance and Tires in Tarrant City, Alabama. Middle class, kind of blue collar. He was a mechanic. But we lived a nice middle class lifestyle. We had a nice house, 2 cars, and they were used cars. They were older cars, but never wanted for anything. My wife and I lived that same basic lifestyle, maybe just a little bit better. But my wife and I both work, where my mom was a housewife.
Mm-hmm.
Both have advanced degrees. My wife has a bachelor's and a master's. I have a bachelor's, a master's, and a doctorate. And we live basically the same lifestyle. so we're working twice as hard to stay in the same place. My father on his one, man, blue collar income could have everything that we have now with both of us working. So most of your middle class Americans are working twice as hard to just stay in the same spot. The number one employer in 1970 was General Motors, and
Right.
people made $23 an hour adjusted for inflation. The number one private employer today is Walmart, and your average Walmart maker makes $11 an hour. But all this money's being made, but it's being taken by the 1%. And I see a lot of the rage I see, particularly on the right, has got to do with that economic insecurity. But they're mad at the wrong people. You should be mad at the people that outsourced your job. That moved your factory to Mexico or to Malaysia. Like Nike could make their shoes right here in America, pay union wages, and still make billions and billions of dollars. But they want to make a little more. So they'll screw their workers over. That's why I support the unions, all the unions, everybody's striking, because I support working class people. Period. I'm always on the side of the working class. It's the greed of the rich. By the way, that's what destroyed Rome. So we might be suffering from the same sickness. The same sickness might be getting us.
Yeah.
But
then I wrote a thing. I don't know if you picked up on it the other day. I said, the Republicans do such a great job because they talk about the redistribution of wealth veiled in Marxism, and there has been a redistribution of wealth. Do it from the bottom to the top.
Yeah, exactly. As Will Rogers said, well, if you give it to the poor, at least it'll eventually go to the rich anyhow, but at least the poor will get a chance to touch it.
I love Will Rogers.
Well, that's I just read recently, and this is so sad, that during the COVID, they put through that the child tax credit, which gave everybody a tax credit, rich or poor, everybody in America got a tax credit if you had a child, and it took the poverty rate down to 8%. And lifted, I forget how many million children out of poverty. It died, and the Republicans in Congress killed it. Okay, and now poverty in America has risen to 12%. Poverty rose 50% just because they killed one program that was good for the working class. I mean, but everybody got it. Middle class, rich, poor, everybody got it. What's wrong with that? Why kill that? So we can do more tax cuts for the rich, I watched 50 years of tax cuts for the rich, and what has it gotten us? I keep waiting for it to trickle down on me, but nothing's trickling down unless somebody's peeing on me or something. Nothing's trickling down.
Well,
I want to see. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was doing a thing when I was talking about how I want to see the lady with $1,100 Social Security check, not have to worry about eating it in a month. Yeah, I've got spinal stenosis so bad in my neck and back. They want me to have I think 3 surgeries, and I'm like, I'm so scared to do it. But my mobility's gotten so bad, I have to use a cane and stuff to get around. Well, they had to end up putting me on disability, which I hated and did not want to do that. But I draw $1,248 a month. Thank God I had my house paid for. If I didn't have that, I mean, there's no ways I could live off something like that.
Yeah, the working class the middle class identifies with the rich millionaire, but really should be identifying with the guy living in a cardboard box, because most of us are like 6 or 7 paychecks away from that cardboard box.
I've read that most American people, they have maybe 2 weeks of income put back that they can survive off of.
I mean, we're all vulnerable, but meanwhile, during the COVID epidemic, the number of billionaires doubled, and most billionaires doubled their wealth. I was reading it, and I think the U.S. News and World Report said that the number of billionaires. So that during the COVID thing, when most of us we're struggling just to survive, and the rich are just ka-ching cashing in. There's something wrong about that. I mean, it's greed. I just see greed as being this poison. You heard about what was it? Bed Bath & Beyond recently declared bankruptcy, right? And the thing the media said basically, the story was basically, well, they got wiped out because of online shopping, and that's not what happened. What happened is they declared bankruptcy because they had $1 billion in cash and they had $3 billion in debt. But over the past 2 years, they spent $10 billion of their own cash assets buying back their own stock, right? Which made more money for the rich and powerful, the stock owners, but it destroyed the company. So 600 people lost their jobs, right? The company declares bankruptcy, but the rich people went out with bags of money, because they mismanaged. It failed because of mismanagement, not because of Amazon and the internet, it was just the greedy bloodsuckers were like, like kind of like something you've seen in The Sopranos, where they come and take over a business, rob it, and move on, declare bankruptcy. Where's the working class people in this? They're struggling, trying to survive, and people are anxious, people are angry, and I think that's what the extremists have clicked into that anger, but then they direct it towards black people or minorities or homosexuals or liberals, as the enemy. Well, what we need to do is unite together. The middle working class need to work together and say, hey, don't forget us. We're the people that built America. America wasn't built by rich people. It was built by working class people, by the middle class, by the working class. It's right there in the title, working class. But they've always been able to divide and conquer us through race or union versus non-union, or northern versus southerner, and they divide us, and the rich get richer. Once again, the Roman Empire. That's what really killed the Roman Empire, was the rich and the powerful screwed over the working middle class to the point that Rome rotted from within. That might be what's happening to us eventually. I hope not, but
I mean, yeah, that's not outside the realm of possibility. Like I remember, '96. So Pat Buchanan was running for president. They said we're going to come at him like the farmers of old with pitchforks storming the castles.
But people we need to go against are the rich. I mean, what killed me about somebody like Trump is that he gets these working class people who Trump has spent his entire life screwing over, and they're his greatest supporters. I mean, Trump is famous for having screwed over, every contractor he ever worked with. He's the rich guy that's screwing you over, and he's the guy you look to as your hero.
I never can't understand how Trump became a deity almost. I just can't wrap my mind around that. I mean, but I mean, like I said, to some he is a deity. This man is the second coming of a.
I don't get that. I've always thought Trump was an ass clown. I always thought, but I thought he was. I didn't see him as a dangerous clown. I just saw him as a clown. Pretending to be rich. I remember when he had the art of the deal and his silly TV show, and I always found him to be obnoxious. But I viewed him as being harmless. The fact that when he ran for president, I was like, this guy's never going to be elected president, but it happened. It's just like, oh my God.
I think this, I swear out, I said this right here. The day he came down on the escalator ride, I said, he's going to win. And so they told me, they said, you're crazy. I said, no. I said, this guy's going to win. This guy's going to win. And he said, no. I said, yeah, trust me. I said, well, you watch this.
And your crystal ball must have been working real well. Chris, it's your party. Fix it, man. Fix it.
The thing, if people go back and they look at Trump and his political views in the '80s, it's a total reversal of what it was right now.
He was a liberal New York, a rich guy.
When he talked about running for president in 2000, the Reform Party, he had this tax plan where the millionaires were going to pay like a 50% tax rate, and he wanted Oprah to be his vice president.
I don't doubt it. If he wasn't born rich, he'd be selling used cars in New Jersey. It'd be Trump's used cars, and you have a little dealership in Jersey. You guy's a born con man, but people buy into it. I don't know. It makes me sad. It really makes me sad. I know Joe Biden. I actually know him. We're not close friends or anything, but I've met him half the time. Joe Biden? Yeah, well, I'm from Delaware. My family was from, and then when my dad died when I was 14. He got killed in a motorcycle accident. And I went away to college. I left Alabama, went away to college when I turned 18. But my family moved back up here. Then I wandered around the military for 8 years, and then so I ended up moving back here. I'm in Maryland now, but I'm a stone's throw away from Delaware because my mom was here, my family was here, so I ended up in Delaware. Like I said, I consider myself from Alabama because that's where I was raised. But I've been home to Alabama in 15 years now. Although I follow Alabama football religiously, I'm so upset right now.
They're not playing good, man. And what's upset with me with is they hype this offensive line. You got three guys over 350 pounds, 6 foot, and they cannot get a push. And
I know they're huge, they're fast. What's going on? I mean, they got to fix that O line. I mean, it was
that's
what was
almost
bad
a
last week. They were playing the University of South Florida. The University of South Florida is my alma mater. I went to the University of South Florida, and I'm like, these guys are nobody. You should be killing them, and they barely won. And then it lost to Texas. I mean, I hope they're going to come back against Ole Miss, right? I mean, Saban's.
I'm worried about that game because I think Kiffin's putting something together there, and you know, my phone.
Lane Kiffin's tricky. But
Yeah,
come on, Saban's won us what six national championships. So I mean,
he's won 7 overall and 6 at Alabama.
I was going to say so. 7 overall and 6 at Alabama. You know, so I still got faith, but I'm worried about this weekend, bud. But like I said, I view myself as an Alabamian. Back to what I was saying. So I met Joe Biden, and he's a decent guy. He's a decent, honest guy. You know, I mean, very, really nice. As far as politicians go, he's a pretty good guy. You know, I ain't saying he's perfect, you know, by any means, but he's a down to earth. He cares about people. You know, I like him. You know, I don't think he's perfect by any means. You know, but he's a decent man. You know.
What I'm concerned with him right now, and it really the same thing with Trump is just his cognitive ability. It's dangerous for anybody to be president that is going down that fast.
Yeah.
And Trump,
80 is old, but Trump's 77, so that
Trump's too old to be president.
Yeah, imagine. I remember when Ronald Reagan was running, and they were like, "Oh man, he's way too old because he'll be 70 while he's president." It's like now 80 is not too much to be president. I mean, you know, but you know, Biden seems all there, but 80 is old. 80 is old. You know, but I don't know who else we got. You know, on the Democratic side. I mean, Kamala Harris has kind of disappeared. I don't dislike her, but she doesn't like excite me or anything.
Well, I tell you what I like Kamala. It's and I don't know why they didn't call her out in those debates. But she was, going after Biden of racism and stuff, and said, I don't believe you're a racist, Mr. Biden, but I know what it was like, having to go through busting. And I was like, lady, you went to school in California in the '80s. It wasn't like you was in Birmingham in 1950, okay?
I know. Her and who is on the Republican, Nikki Haley, who goes on the saying, well, I'm of Asian descent. It's like, dude, you pass as a white woman, I mean, both of them get white privilege basically, and then claim, that play the race card as politics. What are you going to do?
Yeah, and I love the nickname of I keep thinking her name now, Pocahontas. She had 1% Indian in her. What's her name?
Warren, Elizabeth Warren.
Yeah, Elizabeth Warren. She was that was my favorite. Yeah, and that's what with the Democrats last time I was disappointed in. They hated Trump, wanted him out of there. Had 4 years, and that was the best slate of candidates they came up with.
Yeah. Where's the leadership? Like I said, I see Biden as being a good man, but he's old. Kamala Harris just doesn't really get me. But who else we got on the bench? I mean, to come out and take over.
Who I thought would have gained some momentum. Had they not dropped out was Klobuchar. I thought she was moderate enough that she could reach to the middle. She has some pretty good ideas. But it's just like I was just talking the other day. I said the Republican Party and the Democratic Party has went to such extremes that today Ronald Reagan could not win the Republican nomination and Bill Clinton could not win the Democratic nomination.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. The extremists. We got to listen. Quit letting the extremists determine everything. Moderate, middle of the road. Democracy is all about compromise. Democracy, nobody gets what they want. So you and I are running the government. Okay, you want A, I want B. Hey, we're gonna have to come up with C. You get some of what you want, I get some of what I want. We work out a deal, but we work together because we're both Americans. We work for the common good. And just say no, I'm going to get my B, and you're saying no, I'm going to get my A. If not, I'll shut down the government. We'll destroy everything. That's not governing. That's not governing. You know, it's all about compromise. Our founding fathers knew that. You know, in democracy, nobody's completely happy. Everybody's a little bit pissed off. Everybody's a little bit disappointed, and that's okay. We can do that. We can do that. Well, Chris, it's
Yeah.
getting pretty late. I need to.
Yeah, sorry to get so late. Yeah,
No, enjoy the conversation.
yeah, we'll have to do this again sometime. Just curious. Do you teach like in the afternoons? Because like we keep the same hours. You know, we're up at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, I generally, this semester I don't have any morning classes, so I have classes at noon or 1, so I get to sleep in. You know, so I've always been a bit of a night owl. I get more work done at night. So at night I sit down, I grade papers, and I do things up like that. So generally, like 1 or 2 in the morning, then I go have a little dinner and go to bed. Or I'm down here working. I got my study, you can see behind me, and right next to me I got my gym. 800 pounds of free weights and my home gym that I'm very proud of. So this is my little sanctuary, Books.
Yeah, we said about night owl. For some reason, they say people are nocturnal or something. And see, I disagree with it because I feel the most artistic or whatever, right, from like the hours of 11 o'clock at night to 3 o'clock in the morning. That's when I do most of the stuff right there.
My wife goes to bed, and I generally go down to my study and get work done. And I'm most productive after 10 o'clock at night. Till like 2 in the morning. It's just the way my internal rhythms work. Some people get up in the morning at 7 o'clock and get all the work done. Nah, I'm not going to do that. But late at night, boy, I get stuff done.
All right, Kevin, I appreciate it, man.
Chris, it's been a pleasure talking to you, my friend. Take care. Looking forward to reading some more of your posts and stuff. And you have a good night, buddy.
You too, friend.
Take care.
Bye-bye.